If we don't take this seriously, this virus will run ahead of us.
Tonight, an update from Ottawa on COVID-19 numbers in First Nations.
But I want to see my generation, do better than the past generations have when we look towards mental health.
And we meet the Métis youth receiving a Canadian Alliance on Mental Illness and Mental Health Award. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. A Quebec Superior Court judge has ruled in favor of an injunction filed against the Algonquin of Kitigan-Zibi and Barrier Lake. They've been preventing hunters from entering their ancestral territory for 3 weeks now. The request for an injunction was filed by a hunting outfitter earlier this week. The ruling came down on Wednesday evening, according to Kitigan-Zibi Chief Dylan Whiteduck. Provincial police have not yet delivered a copy of the order to the camps, but Whiteduck believes choosing to enforce it would be a bad move, considering the Quebec government's renewed promise to reconcile with First Nations following the death of Joyce Echaquan.
We hope it doesn't come to that. We hope that we're given adequate time and that if they do enforce the injunction on our people, that they do it peacefully and not in a harmful way that doesn't affect our mental well-beings and do it in a way that's in a proper reconciliation way.
The ensemble of Algonquin communities in the region will meet tonight to discuss their next moves. The Thunder Bay Police Service says its major crimes unit is investigating allegations made on Facebook that a First Nations father was beaten to death. The post, which has been shared hundreds of times, alleges 36-year-old Jonathan Achany-Penescom was, quote, beaten with 2 baseball bats by 4 white-looking guys that jumped out of a white-looking truck, enduring 5 days in and out of consciousness. The post said that Achany-Penescom died on October 4th. The 36-year-old was a resident of Lake Helen Reserve, roughly 120 kilometers east of Thunder Bay. A funeral service for Achany-Penescom is being held on Friday. With pandemic fatigue setting in and cases of COVID-19 on an alarming rise in First Nations communities across the country, Indigenous Services Minister Marc Miller gave an update on the numbers and what their plans are on the crest of a second wave. Jamie Pashagumscum reports.
Given what we have seen in the last 2 weeks, there is little doubt that the second wave of COVID will hit Indigenous peoples harder than the first wave.
Miller said First Nations communities have done a great job so far, and their infection rate has been 1/3 that of non-Indigenous communities. To date, there are 768 confirmed cases in First Nations communities, 123 active cases, with 61 hospitalizations. 623 people have recovered from COVID-19 in First Nations communities, and there have been 13 deaths. Per region, there have been 167 cases in BC, 307 in Alberta, 101 in Saskatchewan, 50 in Manitoba, 80 in Ontario, and 63 in Quebec. Indigenous Services says the majority of cases on the rise in First Nations are in Alberta, Manitoba, and British Columbia. Chief Medical Officer Tom Wong gave a word of caution to First Nations.
We have to actually remember that this virus, is very clever. It attacks all communities. It finds a place to actually get into the community. So no place across the country is spared. I think that, if we don't take this seriously, this virus will run ahead of us. We want to run ahead of the virus.
Miller's advice to Indigenous communities ahead of a second wave is to redouble their efforts and continue the measures that save lives. Jamie Pashagumscum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Also at today's press conference, Marc Miller expressed remorse and disgust towards the circumstances surrounding the death of Joyce Echaquan. He suggested Indigenous-led healthcare for Indigenous people might be the answer to regaining trust in the healthcare system.
One thing that hit me harder than I expected was some words that were shared to me by Regional Chief Joyce Echaquan when he said that people, they normalize the situation. They just expect to be treated like garbage when they go in. I don't know why that is, I don't know why that bothers me so much. It just, accepting the status quo that's totally unacceptable is just, it's revolting.
Now to Nunavut, where a cabinet minister has been stripped of his portfolios by the premier because of social media posts. Joining us now from our Iqaluit studio is Kent Driscoll. Kent, thanks for joining us. What exactly did the housing minister post to get the premier to react by stripping his portfolios?
Thanks, Dennis. And yeah, Nunavut's housing minister and also the minister responsible for Arctic College, Patrick Netzer, did have all of his cabinet posts stripped from him due to a social media post. The Facebook post says, and just a warning, this involves both race and abortion, quote, "All lives matter. Just thinking out loud. The movement on BLM. I wonder how many BLM ladies go through abortion and at what stage of the gestation. Are they not lives too?" Now, Netzer is an evangelical Christian, which is a very common thing to be in Nunavut. There's an evangelical Christian church in almost every small community. But about a year ago, controversial preacher from the States came to Iqaluit, Rodney Howard Brown, and he was invited by local preachers. And when he was here, he collected money for his ministry from one of the poorest groups in Canada, Nunavut Inuit. Now, Netzer was asked about it at the time, and he said, quote, "Rodney is a friend of mine, and we connect regularly." Now, just to try and put Howard Brown into some context here, Netzer's friend, Howard Brown once said that a U.S. Supreme Court justice should be shot for insulting the American Constitution. So now stripping Netzer of his portfolios is the strongest step a Nunavut premier can take without the rest of the members in the Assembly. You see, under Nunavut's consensus system, the MLAs pick the cabinet. The premier just decides which job they get. So the premier can't throw him out of cabinet. He can just take away his jobs. Now, that leaves Netzer as what we call in the consensus system a minister without portfolio. And that's happened at least twice before here in Nunavut.
Have the premier or Netzer had anything to say about this so far?
Well, the premier went back to his hometown of Arviat for the long weekend, and he isn't here in Iqaluit. In his statement, though, Premier Civikata wrote in part, quote, "There can be no tolerance for disrespectful, hurtful remarks or actions. We must uphold our government's principles and values." As for the minister without portfolio, Netzer, I was able to speak with him briefly at his Coral Harbor home. He told us, quote, "My personal views are based on my faith and are separate from my job. I've never imposed my religious beliefs on anyone." He also took issue with a part of the premier's statement where Civikata stated, "The government of Nunavut values diversity, equality, and fairness for all." Netzer says he doesn't feel like his views and beliefs are being respected. And he also called the Facebook post free speech.
So, Kent, where do we go from here, and what are Nunavut residents saying about this?
Well, the Assembly meets up again starting October 21st, and this is likely going to be one of the first items they take care of. If he ends up being removed from cabinet, they'll most likely appoint a new cabinet minister. And as for reaction, the Nunavut Black History Society praised Civikata's decision, calling him a leader that really understands that, quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere." Now, that's a Martin Luther King quote. That's pretty high praise from a Black History Society. Another place it's going to make some sort of difference is at Iqaluit City Council. Now, Netzer's daughter, Malaya Lucasi, she's a member of that council. And she wrote the first comment on Netzer's Facebook post. That comment reads in part, quote, "I had the same thought this morning. All lives matter. Why don't we do something for everyone and not just BLM?" Now, I've been talking with members of the Iqaluit City Council, and they expect to make a statement on Lucasi's comments later on today.
Well, no doubt, Kent, you'll be following this through. We'll have to leave it there. Appreciate you speaking with us about it.
Quinn to meet Dennis anytime.
Time to step aside for a quick break, but still to come, we'll hear from two champions for mental health and well-being in Indigenous communities.
putting on more activities within the community, especially with this pandemic. It's going to be harder this winter than ever before.
Welcome back. The Canadian Alliance on Mental Illness and Mental Health recently held the 2020 Champions of Mental Health Awards. And the recipients were celebrated with a virtual awards ceremony. The awards are part of Mental Illness Awareness Week, which began Monday. Our reporter Daryl Stranger caught up with two of the award recipients who focus on mental health and well-being in Indigenous communities.
Even though we still have to stay apart, it's so important that we recognize all the champions of mental health, especially during these difficult times.
The Champions of Mental Health Awards ceremony recognizes Canadians for their work in many aspects of mental health. One of the award recipients is Christopher Mushquash, an associate professor at Lakehead University from Pays Plat First Nation in Ontario. Mushquash offers mental health and addiction services to rural and northern communities.
Very anxious, and we have to, for the health of our people, really focus on what we can do in a sustainable way over the long run as well. But seeing a number of initiatives that communities have been engaged, gives me a lot of hope. There's been a lot of great creativity and a lot of great problem solving and advocacy. And again, I think that really comes from, our focus on relationship, our focus on culture, and our focus on connectedness within our communities and protecting the health of all.
Yes, 5 people and 2 companies were recognized at this year's virtual awards, which featured political leaders and by artists who put on performances to show their support. The Sharon Johnson Award for Youth went to Justin Langen, a 21-year-old Métis from Swan River, Manitoba. Langen knows firsthand how living in an isolated community can have an effect on Indigenous youth.
The main thing, putting on more activities within the community, especially with this pandemic. It's going to be harder this winter than ever before. So, putting more stuff in the community that can keep them involved in a positive manner, I think, is what's going to keep, the youth better.
Langen knows the toll mental health issues can have on an individual, which is why he wants to help be a part of the solution.
I promote mental health because I have mental health issues myself, and I know, a lot of people, a lot of my friends who have mental health issues. So it's extremely important to me on a personal level, but also on a level bigger than myself, that I want to see my generation, do better than the past generations have when they look towards mental health. And I want to see, this epidemic squashed and this stigma to end.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A long and frigid winter is right around the corner for the remote community of Arctic Bay, Nunavut. But not every family there has enough cold weather gear. So a local Inuk artist and activist put a call out on Twitter asking for help to get school kids winter clothing. And she never expected the response she received. Kono Han's call for winter gear was answered by Canadian actor and producer Ryan Reynolds. This week, Canada Goose announced Reynolds had approached the company to donate more than 300 parkas and boots to students in Arctic Bay. Han says she's hopeful the celebrity spotlight will grab Canada's attention and further the discussion on the inequalities Nunavut faces.
Where everything is connected, like kids going to school hungry, like that is such a super real and present thing. So I think even giving them like an ounce of something less to worry about or to think about, and to go to walk to school, to walk back home and not be cold. So it's amazing.
In Saskatchewan, the Dakota Dunes Resort on the Whitecap Dakota First Nation officially opened its doors today. The Dakota Dunes Resort is attached to the Dakota Dunes Casino, which opened its doors in 2007. The new hotel has 155 rooms, but is not running at full capacity because of COVID-19 regulations. Chief Darcy Bear of the Whitecap Dakota First Nation says the hotel's official opening is a victory for the 7 bands of the Saskatoon Tribal Council that own it.
So this project's a $40 million project, 120,000 square feet of space, 155 guest rooms, so a restaurant and lounge, 10,000 square feet of meeting space, and during construction, over 200 construction jobs were created over the 2 years of construction.
Massive forest fires, melting sea ice, and one community that faced a terrifying choice. Rob Smith explores the impact of climate change on Indigenous people in Canada in the season premiere of APTN Investigates. Here's a sneak peek.
In the summer of 2018, the Tahltan Nation faced a monster fire. No one died, but 125,000 hectares were destroyed. A dozen buildings and 20 homes were lost.
Fire went through this way and another one was coming this way. It's like we were surrounded here.
The whole hillside and sky was the sky was red with fire and smoke, and it was a pretty extremely intimidating sight.
Fanny's partner at the time was Tahltan Chief Rick McLean. He says people jumped into action.
All the guys, the cats and excavators, were up there building fire guard above town, and this guy, I think it might have been Dwayne Day, come down over the hill he got a D6, and the fire was right on his heels, and he come down and brought the cat down over the hill here. The other guys were working on the guard up this way, and they had a big clearing there. They just parked all that equipment in the middle of the clearing and jumped out and ran down over the hill.
Dry, windy conditions fed the fire.
The dry index for our area for last year was the highest it's ever been since they started recording it.
And you can catch Rob's entire episode tomorrow night on APTN Investigates. Well, we've got to step aside for another quick break, but coming up, we'll have a look at a TV series digging into some of the greatest battles ever fought.
The Abenaki play a role as sort of frontline soldiers, frontline warriors against this expanding territorial empire.
Welcome back. Now, something you don't see very often, moose in the wheat farming country of southern Saskatchewan. Cattle, horses, and the usual farm stock, sure, but not moose. But this young bull doesn't care. Here he is making some new friends in a cattle herd near Esterhazy, Saskatchewan. Thanks to Bill Chester for putting this picture up on his Facebook page. And just to let you know, your photo of the day can be our photo of the day. If you send us what you got, you can email your shot to share@aptn.ca, and we'll do our best to get them on the air. And now we'll take a look at Friday's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, showers and 10 for St. John's, sunny and 10 in Halifax. 2 with a rain-snow mix in Kuujjuaq, snow and 4 in Nain. 13 under sunny skies in Montreal, 5 in Chibougamau. 15 in Ottawa, 20 in Sault Ste. Marie with rain. Rain and 20 for Thunder Bay, 16 and sunny in Sioux Lookout. 5 with showers for God's Lake, -1 in a rain-snow mix in Puckatawagan. 17 in Winnipeg and Brandon, 15 for Barons River. 15 in Regina, 13 in Saskatoon and Yorkton. 3 in Uranium City, 2 in Stony Rapids. Over to northern Alberta, 6 in Fort McMurray, rain, and 7 in Grand Prairie. 13 in Edmonton, 22 in Lethbridge. 16 and showers for Vancouver, 20 with rain for Kamloops. 7 and rain in Smithers, 10 with showers for Prince George. 2 in Old Crow, -2 with snow in Rock River. Rain and +7 for Yellowknife, snow and +5 for Norman Wells. -3 with snow in Sax Harbor, 2 below in Paulatuck. -1 and snow in Chesterfield and Whale Cove, 0 in Baker Lake. 10 below in Resolute with snow, and 0 in Igloo Lake. In about 5 minutes' time, you can see the season premiere of Nation to Nation with Todd Lamarand and his freshly cleaned desk. Here's a look at what's coming up on the show tonight.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamarand, and this evening is the season premiere of Nation to Nation, where we'll dive deep into the Mi'kmaq battle to earn a moderate livelihood from fishing, a right guaranteed by treaty and upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada, but which has drawn harassment from non-Mi'kmaq fishers. All three of our guests are Mi'kmaq. APTN's Trina Roach will put things into perspective, while Liberal MP Jaime Batiste tells us what he hopes negotiations bring. And Fisher Terrence Augustine lets us know what the grassroots are dealing with on the ground. It's all coming up right after the national news.
Sounds good, Todd. This next story is about a TV series which looks at historic battles Indigenous people fought across the continent and how they shaped our lives today. Tina House has more.
These are nations at war.
Now in its second season on APTN, Nations at War tells the story of some of the greatest battles ever fought, including the Abenaki Nation in eastern North America, which was part of the Wabanaki, which means the Dawnland. Wabanaki represented 5 nations which formed an alliance called the Wabanaki Confederacy. The 7-year war between France and Britain over the Ohio Country in 1754 grew into a global war, with nations like the Abenaki caught in the middle.
The Abenaki play a role as sort of frontline soldiers, frontline warriors against this expanding territorial empire.
Jason Friesen is the producer of the TV series, and he says there is a lot of history that has been left out of textbooks.
I think the real goal of the series isn't to, commemorate violence at all, but it's to show the detrimental aspects of it. But by no means are we promoting war and as something that should happen or should be a solution. I mean, it's just a part of our history.
For Friesen, he says he is inspired to teach the next generations about their ancestors and the truth behind how Indigenous people fought for land, rights, and equality. With the magic of technology and CGI effects, it allowed them to help tell the story visually.
There's no stock footage, obviously. There's no image references for this stuff. So we literally we can recreate some battle scenes. So we'll have a drone shot, for instance, and we can have a bunch of Indigenous warriors on horseback riding in to frame as the drone flies over, and the horses and the warriors are all CGI.
Nations at War is currently airing on APTN. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Can't say I've seen that show. It looks pretty good. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. You can find much more over on our website, aptnnews.ca, and never miss a headline by downloading the APTN News app. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Nation to Nation with Todd Lamarand is up next. Have a great night.